Hi everybody, Mr. Untitled here with another video for you to keep learning from home. Today we are going to be talking about vocabulary. And as you know, vocabulary means important words that I need to use when I'm talking about a certain topic, in a specific subject. Today's topic is math, which is a topic that I know a lot of you guys like. And we are going to be talking about something you already know. We are going to be talking about rounding. You know what rounding is and you know how to round. So today we are really going to focus on the words, the vocabulary that we use when we are rounding in math. Before we start, we have to review some terms that we have already learned because those terms are very important when it comes to that math skill, when it comes to rounding. The first term that we should review is the word place value. You have been learning about place value since you were in first and second grade, and at this point you already know what place value is. Place value tells us that every single digit has a different value depending on where that number is. So again, on this example that we have right in front of us, the number 153. The number 1 is the number with the biggest value. That 1 represents 100 units. The number 3, it's the number with the smallest value because that one is in the ones place. So the number 3 represents only 3 units. And the number 5, it's in the middle of the number. So it's in the tens place. So if I count by 10, 5 times, I have 50. So that number 5 represents 50. So the concept of place value is very important in math. And it's even more important when it comes to rounding. You really have to be able to understand place value so you can round numbers to the nearest tens and nearest hundreds. The next word we're going to talk about today is the word estimate. To estimate something means to find a number that's close to the exact number. You don't necessarily need to find the exact number, but you're finding something that's really, really close. So for example, I can show you a jar full of coins and I can ask you to estimate how many coins are there. So you are going to guess, but it's not going to be a random guess. It's going to be a guess based on some information that you already have. You know how big a coin is, you know how much space a coin takes, so you are going to be able to estimate. You are going to be able to make that guess. So when it comes to math, we do some estimating. We also sometimes have to find numbers that are nearby, and that has to do with rounding. That's pretty much what rounding is. And one word that you are going to hear a lot when it comes to estimating and rounding numbers, it's the word about. So if I go back to that example with the jar full of coins, I can ask you, about how many coins do you think are there in the jar? So when I ask you to estimate, I might be using the word about. So be on the lookout for that word. The word about means to estimate and most of the times also means to round. And the last word we are going to talk about is a word that I have been using a lot already. It's the word round. When you round numbers, you are looking for the nearest 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. So if I'm rounding numbers to the nearest tens, I'm counting by tens. If I'm rounding numbers to the nearest hundreds, I'm counting by hundreds, and so on. We have done a lot of rounding by tens and hundreds. We haven't really practiced a lot of rounding by thousands, so I don't need you to worry about that right now. Okay, so now that we reviewed some concepts that we already know about place value, estimate, the word about, how important that word is regarding to rounding, and rounding itself, it's time for us to review the rules before we practice rounding some numbers. We are going to do some practice, but before we do that, let's review the rules. When I have a number that's 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, I'm going to round down. If I have a number that's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, I'm going to round up. And a fun way for me to remember that, it's trying to memorize this little rhyme that I have right there on this slide. It says, 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So that's the way that my brain remembers that if I have a number that's smaller than 4, I'm just going to rest. I'm going to go down. And if I have a number that's bigger than 5, I'm going to raise the score. I'm going to round up. And the last thing that we should do before we actually start practicing rounding numbers is review the steps. There are certain steps that I can follow that's going to make rounding a lot easier for me. So let's take a look at these steps. Step number 1. you underline the place value you are rounding to. Sometimes you have to round to the nearest tens, sometimes you have to round to the nearest hundred. So always underline the value that you have to round to, so your brain always remembers what is the value that you were thinking about. Step number 2, find the neighbors. I have to find which number lives before and which number lives after the number that I have. Step number 3, look right next door. And you see that the word right is all in capital because you have to look at the number to the right. That's the number that's going to tell me if I'm going to round up or round down. That's the boss. So the step number 3 is look at the right number and circle the boss. And the last step, step number 4, you apply the rule. If it's 4 or less, let it rest, you're going to round down. If it's 5 or more, raise the score. You're going to round up. So let's take a look at the first number we are going to round together. The first number is the number 36, and I'm being asked to round to the nearest 10. So if I go back to my steps, I'm going to think, what is the first step? The first step is I have to underline the place value of the number that I'm rounding to. So I'm rounding to the nearest tens. So I'm going to underline the number that's on the tens place. And on this example right here, the number 3 is on the tens place. 30, it's 3 groups of 10. So I'm going to underline 3. For the second step, I have to find the neighbors. Which 10 lives before 36 and which 10 lives after 36. And to do that, I can also use a number line or I can skip count, which is something that we all know how to do. So they are asking me to round this number to the nearest 10. So it would be interesting if I could skip count by 10. I skipped count by 10 and I wrote my numbers on the bottom there. I kind of made my own number line. So now that I have my number line, I can find the 10 that lives before 36 and the 10 that lives after 36. Here's how I do it. I usually put the number 36 in my head and I count forward until I find another 10. So I have 36 in my head, 37, 38, 39, 40. Wait a second, 40 is a 10. So 40 is going to be the 10 that lives after my number, after 36. And if I count backwards, I can find the 10 that lives before 36. So 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30. And I also have my number line to help me. So 30 is the 10 that lives before 36. So I just finished step number 2. I found the number that lives before and I found the number that lives after my number. Now let's do step number 3. Step number 3 says, look right next door and circle the boss. And the word right is all capital for me to really remember that I have to look at the number to the right of my place value. So my place value, I'm rounding to the nearest tens. So I underline the 3. If I look at the right of that number, I can see the number 6. So I'm going to circle the number 6. So 6 is going to be the boss. He's the number that's on the right of my place value. He's going to be the boss. And now my last step is apply a rule. 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So I see that the number 6, it's bigger than 5. So I'm going to raise the score. I'm going to round up. So 36 rounded to the nearest 10 is equals to 40. So there was the first example. How was it? Did you remember all the rounding rules? I really hope so. We have learned how to round to the nearest tens and hundreds in school. We practice a lot in school, and you should be very comfortable doing that by yourself. We are going to practice rounding some numbers at the end of the video. There is an exit ticket, but before we jump into the exit ticket, let's do one more together. Let's look at the number 748. I'm being asked to round this number to the nearest 100. So let's think about my steps. The first step, I have to underline the place value that I'm rounding to. So I have to round to the nearest hundreds. So I'm going to underline the number that's on the hundreds. If I look at that number and think about place value, I know that the number 7 is the number that's on the hundreds place. I have 7 hundreds. So I'm going to underline the number 7. For the second step, I have to find the neighbors. I have to find the hundreds that live before 700 and after 700. So now I'm not counting by 10 anymore. You can see that on the bottom there, I already made my own number line. And this time I'm not counting by tens because they're not asking me to round by tens. They are asking me to round by hundreds. So I made my own number line counting by hundreds. So now let's look at the hundreds place. I have the number 7, 700. If I look at my number line, what is the 100 that lives after 700? You're right, 800. So 800, it's going to be the 100 that goes after. And what is the 100 that comes before 748? It's 700. So 700 is the 100 that comes before. 800, it's the 100 that comes after. So now I have my neighbors right in front of me. The third step tells me to look right next door and circle the boss. So I have to find the boss. I have to find that guy that's going to tell me if I'm going to round up or round down. So I'm going to look at my place value. Again, I'm rounding to the nearest hundreds. That's why I underline the number 7. And if I jump one digit to the right, I'm going to find the boss. I'm going to find the number 4 and I'm going to circle that number. Now that I have the boss circled, I have to think about the last step, step number 4, and I have to think about my rounding rules. 4 or less, let it rest. So the number 4 is smaller than 5. It's on the first group of numbers, and the number 4 tells me to round down. So 748 rounded to the nearest 100 is equal to 700. So that was the second practice. I decided to round one number to the nearest 10 and one number to the nearest 100 because I really wanted your brain to remember all the rounding rules, how to use the rounding rules, and also how to follow the steps. So we did some practice together. We reviewed the rules. We talked about some of the new words, not really new words because you already know them, but some important words, vocabulary words when it comes to rounding. Now it's time for the exit ticket. You are going to have to answer this question and then write a sentence explaining the steps that you took to solve the problem. I'm going to read the problem with you. Poppy and Branch are organizing a big party so all the trolls can play music together. They invited 263 trolls. About how many seats do they need? Oh, remember that word? The word about. It has to do with rounding. It's asking me to estimate. So you have to round 263 to the nearest 100. That's the first step. The second step, once you finish rounding and you found your answer, you are going to write 2 or 3 sentences explaining the steps you took to solve it. And you have to use the words from the word bank below. The words are round, estimate, place value, first, next, after, finally, or any other transition word you know. I hope this video helped you remember some of the important words you need to know when it comes to rounding, and I hope you can practice doing a lot of rounding by yourself at home. And if you finish doing the exit ticket and you still want to do a little rounding, you still want to practice rounding, that's okay. Go around your house, ask every single one of your family members to give you a number. Round that number to the nearest 10, round that number to the nearest 100. So that's it for today, my friends. I hope you enjoy this rounding vocabulary video, and I hope you keep practicing learning from home. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.